This is a clip from Basketball at the Bar Live. Okay, Calvin. We're ready. We're here. It's time. It's time to go over the Sacramento Kings and what they need to do this offseason to get back to the playoffs. This is a tough one for me because I'm emotionally invested in this squad. But just to start off here, the Kings had the fourth worst record in the Western Conference last season, 30 wins, 52 losses. The ESPN depth chart has Fox at the point guard, Mitchell at the shooting guard, Barnes at the small forward, Trey Lyles starting as power forward, and Domantas Sabonis at the center position. The Kings do have the fourth pick in this year's NBA draft. They're projected to take Jaden Ivey, and as Calvin mentioned, there's also been rumors that they are trying to actively trade up to number 2, or maybe they've already completed a deal that we haven't heard about yet. Teams are not able to trade consecutive draft picks, so maybe they're waiting or something like that until the actual day of the draft for someone to be drafted for them, and then they make a trade. It gets complicated. But before we dive in here on offseason needs, I just want to catch everybody up here as far as salary cap goes. De'Aaron Fox has got 4 years left on his max deal. He's making $30 million next season. Harrison Barnes is an $18 million expiring contract. Sabonis has got 2 years left on his deal. They got a few guys that are expiring in Jeremy Lamb, Josh Jackson, Dante DiVincenzo, who will be a restricted free agent this offseason. Rashawn Holmes has got 3 years left on his deal. Justin Holiday's got a year left on his deal. And then you got guys like Mo Harkless, Terrence Davis, Alex Len, and Trey Lyles that all have 1 year left on their deal. And Davion Mitchell has got 3 years left because he just completed the first year of his rookie contract. So, Calvin, I want to hear from you. What do the Kings need to do this offseason to make it to the NBA playoffs next year?
Well, unlike the other three teams that we have previously talked about on this show, the Kings are at least more built or set in terms of their roster. Like, you know, Portland has all those expiring contracts. They're going to need to bring in a lot of players. Oklahoma City is basically a two-player team right now, and the rest of them are all young guys, or 2 or 3 players, I would say. And then they've got a bunch of draft picks, so it's uncertain what they do. The Kings at least have an outline of what their team is going to look like next year. The goal for them, as we've said all along, and as they've said, is upgrading talent on the roster, particularly at 2 positions, shooting guard and power forward. I would add small forward or wing in general into there because I like Harrison Barnes a lot, but there's a question of whether he's going to be on this team next year to begin with. And behind him, they don't really have much depth at that position. So, best case scenario for them, that deal where they move to number 2 in the draft is already done, and they take Chet Holmgren number 2, or say it's Jabari Smith, depending on who goes 1. That, I think, for the draft alone is their best possible outcome. If they aren't able to move up to number 2 and they stay at 4, I've moved off the Jaden Ivey train. I don't think that that's the right fit for this team. We've seen them go with best available in the past couple of years. It has worked out for them in terms of acquiring talent. They were able to get Sabonis from a deal where they drafted Tyrese Halliburton, and Davion Mitchell looks like a pretty good player. I think they need to move away from that and go towards best fit for this at 4 if they're going to stay there. And for me, that's Keegan Murray. He's a guy that's an interchangeable wing player. He could start at power forward. He could start at small forward. I think he's the most NBA-ready player in the draft. Number 1 scorer in college last year. He can put the ball in the basket, do a lot of things really well. Then that leaves you with shooting guard. And that's where it gets a little more complicated or a little tougher to decide here for Sacramento. DiVincenzo's a restricted free agent. Most people are under the impression that they're going to bring him back. Does he start at the 2? What do they do with Justin Holiday, who was sort of a failed experiment last year in the second half for the Kings? I think if you were able to move up, draft Chet Holmgren, and have DiVincenzo as your starting shooting guard, that's a great start. What that leaves you with on the bench is the question mark. Where do you fill in the wings? Who are you looking to in free agency? I'm looking at guys like Victor Oladipo, TJ Warren, people that you might be able – it's a risk to sign those guys because of injury concerns. But for the solid starting lineup or the starting lineup that I'm going to throw out there, and the potential of having somebody like that off the bench for a reasonable contract. I like that idea. And then the last question mark for me is, who are they going to go with at center? Rashawn Holmes is on this team. We know Sabonis is going to be there. Do they want to play him at center? Would they rather play him at power forward? If it was me, I'd be looking to trade Rashawn Holmes, and I would re-sign Damian Jones. That's the guy that I want coming off the bench at center.
Yeah, I like that a lot. The biggest question for me is just surrounding this draft, because it is coming up here, and we've heard the rumors the Kings want to trade up to 2, but what is that really going to cost? Is that going to cost a pick next year? Is that going to cost potentially a guy in Davion Mitchell? Which I don't know if I'd be okay with a deal like that.
I don't see the Thunder already have a bunch of guards and a bunch of young guards. Davion Mitchell might be better than some of the guards they have, but I think you can make this deal and not have it include Davion.
Yeah. I mean, that would be ideal. If I can give up the 4th pick in Rashawn Holmes and move up to 2, that is an absolute steal and a win for the Kings. I don't know if that's possible, but if they can make that happen, I think that would be a great way to move forward, is to take a guy in Chet Holmgren, have Holmgren, Sabonis, Fox, potentially Barnes, and Dante DiVincenzo. I like that lineup. I think that lineup has a great potential to make it to the playoffs next season. I did call the Kings making the playoffs. I've done it 2 years in a row. Definitely messed up last year. But I think we finally got our guy coach, and I like what this team's doing. So I think they will make the playoffs next season. It's just a matter of what does happen this offseason, what actually happens. Monty says that he's going to be extremely aggressive, and we've seen that already with all the rumors about them moving up in the draft. That doesn't even take into consideration free agency and what potentially might happen there. But I think this Kings team has a lot of potential and a lot of different options this offseason. I'm going to throw Harrison Barnes out there, $18 million expiring deal after next season. He has value to a contender. He also has value as an expiring deal. So I could see the Kings potentially moving on from him. You mentioned Rashawn Holmes. I think he is definitely not going to be on this roster next season. Hopefully the Kings can get some value from him. But I think they need to bring in one more star player. If that's a Bradley Beal or a Zach LaVine or one of those guys, would be absolutely incredible. But I don't know how realistic that really is. So I like your Victor Oladipo take in bringing in guys like that maybe have a high upside and not so low of a downside. But it's going to be an interesting offseason for the Sacramento Kings, that's for sure. And it all starts with the NBA draft here in just a couple weeks. Any more thoughts on the Kings?
I'm just curious to see what they do. Like, we've obviously been talking about what they'll do this offseason for quite some time. And I still think that the goal for Monty is, he has his eyes on a bigger prize. Whether it's, somebody like a Pascal Siakam, or that's the ultimate goal for this team is, like you mentioned, another star player or another high impact player that they're going to add to this team. And I'm really curious to see what the draft holds for them. Yep. Are they moving up to number 2? Are they moving up to number 2 to use that pick for their own future? Are they going to trade the player that they take for a win now player, something like that? It's very interesting because this team, as we've talked about for a long time, has seemingly been on the cusp of the playoffs and underachieved. What are the moves that are going to be made to get them over the hump there, over the hill? Yeah, definitely. And do they trade the pick or do they keep it at 4? I agree with you. I'm off the Jaden Ivey train completely. I'm taking best player available. And it's not that I don't like Jaden Ivey.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people think he is the best player available at that spot. And I see Key Kings here talking about best player available as well. If you're the Kings, you can't worry about the fit. I disagree with that statement. Not 100% of the time, but I just feel like the Kings have done it. Taking best player available has gotten them to this point, and some people think that's a good thing. I see it as being right in the middle. Yes, taking it did end up getting them Sabonis, which is great. But if you just constantly are going with best player available, you run the risk of getting yourself into this like spin cycle system where you may not ever be improving. You're just taking the best available player to either see if pray that it works, or then we trade them. It's a tough call, but I think Keegan Murray helps this team and is a really, really good player as well. So
it's tough.
It helps this team more than Jaden Ivey would, I should say.
It's tough because you look at guys like Luka Doncic and even Michael Jordan that were passed based on fit, not best player available. It's definitely
that's different
tough.
though.
It's
I
tough.
mean, hindsight is always 20/20, right? But but we're not talking about a Michael Jordan here in this draft. So I just worry if you're going to commit to De'Aaron Fox, I worry about bringing in another backcourt running mate, like a guy that has the ball in his hands a lot.
I agree. And I do like Dante DiVincenzo. I hope they bring him back. I think the Kings have a great shot at having 2 All-Stars next season in Fox and Sabonis, and potentially a third one if they're able to trade for a guy like Bradley Beal or Pascal Siakam or one of these other guys, which I think is very, very unlikely. But you got to take a chance. You got to try it. If you are a Kings fan, make sure you hit that like button down below, and please hit that subscribe button. If you have any thoughts, questions, concerns, or you want to let us know what you think about the Kings offseason, let us know down below in the comments. If you're watching this on Royal Rebounds, make sure you check out our other channel, Basketball at the Bar, where we talk about the entire NBA. And if you're here on Basketball at the Bar, make sure you check out Royal Rebounds, which is our Sacramento Kings only content channel. Thank you guys so much, and we appreciate you guys watching. So much for watching. As always, please don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button. You can join us live every single weekday, Monday through Friday.